Panther Legal Warriors, avoid the critical mistake of just blowing off your Department of Licensing hearing, of not requesting a Department of Licensing hearing if you get arrested or accused of a DUI. You have to avoid this mistake. I'm going to cover the reasons why in this video. Stay tuned. My name is Attorney Lance Fryrear. I'm a defense attorney in Lynnwood, Washington. My law firm has been defending people charged with crimes all throughout Washington State for more than 20 years. I'm putting out these videos to help educate the public. So if you find this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people get to see it. More people get the help they need. Now, it's been a while since I put out a video about a Department of Licensing hearing. And it's because there's been other videos I've been putting out, but it got brought to my attention that we needed to cover why it's so important to request a Department of Licensing hearing if you get pulled over for a DUI in Washington State. And a lot of people don't do it because it costs $375 to request that hearing. There is a fee hearing waiver you can fill out, and I advise you to do that if you think you could qualify. And there's sort of some reasons you may qualify on the paperwork. But we need you to request that hearing so we have a better way to defend you. Now, let me cover why that is. So a Department of Licensing hearing means that you've been pulled over for DUI and you've either blew .08 or higher if you're an adult, .02 or higher if you're a minor. You've had a blood result of 5 nanograms or more of THC in your blood, or you've refused a lawfully requested breath test or blood test. Now, sometimes we don't know if that's what's happened because you may not remember it that well. But usually you're going to know if this happened because the officers will give you a form to request a licensing hearing. So take a look at your paperwork. If you have requests for DUI hearing form, you probably need to be requesting a licensing hearing. Now, there's 2 ways you request a licensing hearing. One is going to be through the mail. That's what I prefer, but I'm an old man and I like the mail, okay? And it needs to be postmarked within 7 days of the date that you got pulled over. Unless it was a blood draw result, that might be a year later. Then you've got 7 days from the date they mailed the notice of the blood draw result, but probably like 1% of you watching. And you can do it through the mail, which I like, or you can do it online through your Department of Licensing Licensing Express account. They used to call that, now it's the Licensing Express account. And you have a Licensing Express account if you have a Washington license you've ever renewed, or if you have a vehicle where you ever renewed their tabs online. If you don't have one, you can set one up. And if you have an out-of-state license, you're going to need to do it through the mail. And yes, if you have an out-of-state license, you still need to request a licensing hearing. If you happen to do this request online, I tell my clients to take a photograph of the final screen where it shows your request went through, just in case there's a computer glitch or something. I've had one experience in the history of my firm where someone says they requested a hearing online and they never got their hearing. I've never had that happen for any client when they've tried to do it through the mail. Now, my dad worked for the post office. I might be biased. I worked for them for one summer a long time ago, but they haven't let our clients down as of yet. So once you request that licensing hearing, what's going to happen? The Department of Licensing is going to set you a hearing within approximately 30 days of the date of the incident of when you got pulled over for the DUI and had the breath test or blood test or all that. And they're going to send you a hearing date, which is a telephonic hearing, and they're going to send your attorney, if you listed an attorney, the hearing date and a copy of the police report and a thermometer certification, all this stuff. Now, if you didn't list an attorney, you're going to get sent all that stuff. And if you happen to get an attorney before the hearing, which you need to, make sure you give all that stuff to your attorney. And at that licensing hearing, there's going to be a determination made of whether or not the evidence submitted to the Department of Licensing is sufficient to meet the rules under the implied consent rules and other legal things that happen in these cases about whether it's sufficient to uphold the suspension of your license or to cancel the suspension of your license. And I'm not going to get into those details here because that's a pretty long video. This video is about, again, why did you need to request one? But I first wanted to cover how it is you request one. So why you need to request it? What's your benefit? I'm out $375, Lance. Well, if you don't request a hearing, you're going to have a suspension of your license starting 30 days after the event. That's what the law says. If you qualify for a suspension, it starts 30 days later. And if you request that licensing hearing, it puts off that suspension until there's actually a hearing to decide whether or not that suspension is valid or not. And that's usually good to put things off. It's going to delay inconvenience, it's going to make your life easier for longer. That's a pretty good idea. But that's not the only reason why we need to do it. The main reason we attorneys want you to do it is because it gives us a chance to improve your defenses. And how is that? How could it improve my defenses, Lance? Well, these licensing hearings are done on the paperwork only typically. They're just done on the police report. And if you're representing yourself, you're pretty much only going to be able to do it on the police report. You're not going to know how to do the rest of it. But if you have an attorney, us attorneys, if we're really working hard, we can have subpoenas issued for any police officers that wrote reports. And if a police officer wrote a report and we have a subpoena issued and we serve the officer timely, then we get a couple of advantages. The first advantage is if they fail to appear at the telephonic hearing on the date that where the hearing is scheduled, it usually gets moved once when we subpoena the officer, so there's enough time. Whatever date it is they're subpoenaed for, they fail to appear without excuse, we can move to dismiss for a due process violation. It doesn't dismiss your DUI, but it dismisses your suspension. And that's great because we no longer are suffering a suspension from the administrative side of the case. We still might suffer one on the criminal side, but it at least beats one of the suspensions. The exception is if you have a CDL, a commercial driver's license, Department of Licensing is not allowed to dismiss for a no-show. But, we've got to just do things a little bit differently in those cases. But let's say the officer does show up, there's still a big advantage for us. Sometimes we sort of prefer they show up secretly, us defense attorneys, because if they do show up, now we get to ask them questions under oath without a prosecuting attorney there to help them. Because remember, this is a civil case. It's the Department of Licensing versus you and your driver's license, not the state versus you trying to put you in jail. So this officer is going to be calling in. And now most DUIs happen about what? Midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. This officer's shift may not be when this licensing hearing is likely happening, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., right? And so typically that means they're going to be at home. They're going to be a little more casual. Who knows if they even studied their report. And now we're asking them questions under oath that's being recorded, and their answers are often less than perfect. We can expose problems in their case. Hey, officer, how do you instruct a walk and turn test? Well, they give us the instructions and they miss one of the instructions. Well, they're under oath saying they instructed it wrong, right? We can never get that in the criminal case because it'll never get that far to the motion typically. If it does, now the prosecutor's going to be more against you because we've made them work. That's a deep and long conversation we won't get into here. But it basically gives us what I call a free shot to gather evidence directly from the officer when the officer has no one there to rehabilitate them, when the officer may not have studied that much, the officer may be acting casual in his or her robe, having cornflakes at his or her house, right? That's the type of advantage we can get. And there's no downside, right? If they answer the questions poorly, your attorney can get a copy of the tape, right? And we can use that to say, look, everything they did wrong. If they answer the questions correctly, like, the Terminator, robotically correct, well, prosecutor's never going to know that tape exists. They're not part of this. We just don't use it, right? And the worst that can happen is they reaffirm the suspension you're already going to suffer later at a much later date. So for that $375, you get a chance to have your suspension canceled. You get a chance to gain very important evidence for your criminal defense case. And at the worst, you have your suspension delayed, so we have more time to get our life in order and to deal with things into plan if we want to get an ignition interlock license, stuff like that. And so that's why it's so important to request a licensing hearing. I always say, if you don't have the money, at least put in try it with the hearing fee waiver. And nowadays, the officers don't often give you the hearing fee waiver. It might mention it in the request for DUI hearing. You're going to have to go online. And you can, if you do it through the License Express account digitally, you can do it all digitally. If you want to be old-fashioned like me and use the mail, you can print out the hearing fee waiver. If they grant it, they're going to give you your hearing. If they don't grant it, they're usually going to send you a letter back saying, hey, we denied your request for a waiver. You want your hearing, would give you this long to pass the $375. And so it's an important thing to do. If you forgot to do it, it's not going to ruin your life. It's not the end of the world. At least you save the $375. There's just some chances to catch lightning to help your case that you're not going to have, but it's not going to be so detrimental to your criminal case that you should, lose sleep over it. So This is why it's so important. Please request a licensing hearing. The downside is only the money. Please get yourself an attorney. The public defender cannot handle a licensing hearing. It's civil. They will not handle a licensing hearing for you. They can only handle the criminal side. And if you get this requested, hopefully good things will happen. Hopefully you'll have a better outcome. So if you found this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people get to see it. More people get the help they need. And more importantly, if you have a DUI or other criminal matter in Washington State, feel free to give my office a call. We get on board, listen to what happened, we'll identify a way forward, and we will be there for you. Thank you.